video, we will be discussing a topic of English which is known as infinitives. But before directly beginning with infinitives, let us first understand from where this infinitive has arrived. So first we are going to discuss about finites and non-finites. Now finites are all those verbs which has a subject and it shows some kind of tense or a person. Okay, for now we are talking about finites. Finites are all those verbs. Actually finite is a verb. So finites are all those verbs which has subject and they show tense, a person or a number. They are referred to as finites, and then there is another term which is referred to non-finites. So non-finites, unlike finites, they do not have subject and they do not show a person or a number. Now I said that we will be discussing about infinitives. So non-finites are further categorized as three parts. First is infinitives, then there are gerunds, and last we have participles. Infinitives, gerunds and participles, and out of that today we will be covering the topic of infinitives, and under that topic specifically today we will be discussing about split infinitive. So this is the basic chart of non-finites. Because the topic infinitives is under non-finites, we will just pay attention to non-finites for a time. Non-finites are all those verbs, they are also the verbs. Finites are also verbs and non-finites are also under the category of verbs, but these are all those verbs which have no subject and they do not show any person or a number. Here they are categorized as infinitives, gerunds and participles, out of which today we will be focusing on infinitives. Now let us understand the definition of infinitives. Infinitives are all those verbs which are followed by to or preceded by to. For example, to play, to obey, to understand. So here I am saying to plus my verb. Here to is my infinitive. So infinitive plus verb, infinitive plus verb, infinitive plus verb. So here they are defined as non-finites, and here I am specifically talking about infinitives. Now we have understood what infinitives are, that they immediately follow a verb. Infinitive immediately follows a verb. But in case in between the infinitive and the verb there occurs another word, like to happily play, to please obey, to carefully understand. I said all those words which immediately follow the verb or which are immediately followed by the verb are referred to as infinitives. But split infinitives are all those words which come in between the infinitive and my verb. So they split the infinitive and the word. Here, to happily is splitting my infinitive and the verb that I am using in my sentence. Therefore, these three are the examples of split infinitives. These three are the examples of split infinitives. All those words which split the infinitive from the verb are referred to as split infinitives. Now earlier, the split infinitive was not considered to be a proper form of English language, or we would say that this can be grammatically incorrect in the previous times. But today we have now finally concluded that there are certain words which are necessary to create a blockage between the infinitive and the verb. Some words are really necessary to be placed between these two so that the sentence becomes more meaningful. Therefore, now we have arrived to the term which is called as split infinitives, and now people are accepting this term in general. So we have understood that the basic idea of split infinitives is that it breaks the infinitive to from the verb, and that verb can be any form of verb. Now, I have discussed like to carefully understand. We've discussed this term, to carefully understand. Now over here, to is my infinitive and understand is my verb, and carefully it modifies the verb understand. Therefore, carefully is referred to my adverb. So now we have noticed that sometimes it becomes very important to add an adverb in front of verb in order to make the sentence look more correct and more meaningful. Therefore, this gives rise to split infinitives. So here we will be discussing that even the position of adverb should be placed properly, otherwise the entire emphasis gets changed and our sentence looks mildly wrong. For example, I say, you ought to bring the bag. Now, you ought to bring the bag. This is not an example of split infinitive. Why? Because to and my verb, infinitive and my verb, there is no blockage in between them. So this is not my split infinitive. But when I say you ought to carefully bring the bag. So when the word carefully comes, you ought to carefully bring the bag. Now it is splitting my verb from the infinitive. Therefore, this is an example of split infinitive. Then I say, this is the same example. Then if I say that you are to at least obey your parents. So when I say you are to at least obey your parents, are to and to plus obey is my verb. At least over here is acting as a split between my infinitive and my verb. So this is an example of split infinitive. Then if I say that you should happily admit your mistake. When I say you should happily admit your mistake, is this my infinitive? No. It is not my infinitive and therefore it cannot be a split infinitive. Why? Because I cannot see to plus my verb. So what I mean to say is that a sentence will be considered as an infinitive only when it will have to as an infinitive plus the verb. Since there is no such thing like that, therefore this is not regarded as my infinitive. But if I say you ought to happily admit your mistake, then this is an example of split infinitive, because to and admit, that means infinitive plus verb, it is separated by a word. That word again over here is my adverb. So this is an example of split infinitive. But there are certain cases where we can at least avoid the usage of split infinitive. For example, this sentence can even be modified like you ought to admit your mistake happily. So even if I use happily as an adverb in the last and to and admit is being used, so this will be regarded as my simple infinitive and not my split infinitive. So in such cases, we can also avoid the usage of split infinitive. We can avoid making split infinitive because people generally consider to avoid the usage of split infinitive. So in this video, we have discussed about infinitives and then we have specially focused on split infinitive. Split infinitive is that type of infinitive in which the infinitive is separated from the verb, maybe by using any kind of word. It can be an adverb or it can be any other form of word. People we studied that they generally do not make use of split infinitives because they feel that the usage is not proper. But recently we have come to a conclusion that the usage of split infinitive is required in some places. So we also implemented different examples of split infinitives to understand the concept in a better way.